maybe there's less jobs or even internships for that stuff, but the opportunities to have hands-on experience with these tools is becoming greater and greater because they're so accessible.
Noah,
Hey,
great to see you.
how's it going?
Good. So you gave a talk here, a panel
Mhm.
about the good, bad, and ugly of AI.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you seeing trends in AI of both like people's fears about it and also like, or what are some misconceptions around this that people should be afraid of?
Yeah, no, this is what we were talking about. I mean, a lot of people have the fear that AI is going to steal their job or it's going to somehow make them redundant or replace the movie business. But what I'm seeing is it's, ultimately becoming one more tool in the toolbox that people who are able to pass all that and leverage it well are going to, do very well in the biz. And people that are saying, oh, it's not going to be good for you, probably not going to be great for them.
Yeah. What are some of the practical applications you've been seeing of it? Let's talk about the utility stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, utility AI has been around forever. I mean, if you've ever done any kind of like video editing or sound editing, there's all kinds of little AI metadata kind of tagging that happens in the background. And so that's just, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, and I don't think that's ever been controversial. Like nobody's like, oh, this thing logged all my footage for me and tagged people's faces. Like,
I'm upset about this.
yeah, I'm upset about this. It's taking my job.
Time, yeah.
I mean, sure, if you were like a really low-level assistant, I suppose you could be like, well, I could have done that, but other than that.
That's something that was brought up in the panel too that was interesting, where it was like some of the stuff that AI is replacing is sort of these entry-level jobs that help people get a foot in the door.
That's true.
What's the thought, or I guess if you are young or you're trying to get your foot in the door, what should you do now if you are young?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like anything else. It's the most important skill. What I said in the panel, I feel like the most important skill to cultivate is to be good with people.
Mm-hmm.
Be easygoing. Don't be a prima donna. Don't bring drama to the set because those are the kind of people that don't get hired from show to show. In fact, I'd even say you could be a good technician, have a good mastery of your crafts, and be really good with people. And that'll get you much further than being like a ninja in craft and a total nightmare to work with, as I would think in any other industry as well.
Yeah, usually you want to, you gotta, especially here, you got to hang out with people 8, 10, 12 hours a day. You want to be with people you like.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking too, from a young person's perspective, maybe the trade-off is like, yes, there are less entry-level jobs, but there now are tools where as a person with limited resources, you can do a lot more than we could have in like 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think back to YouTube now too, of just like anything you want to learn.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
deep dive, and you got time as someone young, so you can like figure out Unreal, you can figure out.
Yeah, there's tons of great tools out there you can train yourself on. I mean, learning Unreal is never a bad idea because, I mean, you could go into video games, you can go into virtual production, you can go into like simulation. I mean, there's just all kinds of cool stuff you can do with that tool. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being self-trained. I mean, I think building up a nice reel of work where you can point out, I did this, I did this, I did this, for whatever thing you want to do is probably going to be just as useful and probably way more fun than like, oh, I was like carrying this person's coffee for a while.
Yeah,
Like,
the errand runner.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, sure, that's a good way to get your foot in the door.
I was a manual transcriber for hours of logging footage.
Exactly.
Not very exciting.
Exactly, and it's exactly that. I mean, you have a lot more ability to just get into that stuff on your own anyway. So, I mean, maybe there's less jobs or even internships for that stuff, but the opportunities to have hands-on experience with these tools is becoming greater and greater because they're so accessible.
Yeah. Shifting to virtual production, what you've been seeing in virtual production, that was also your bigger niche of where you started and what you focus on.
Yeah, so, what they're doing is we're getting, obviously, 3rd, 4th, 5th generation products from some of these companies. They're always doing tighter pixel pitches, anti-reflective coating, better color science, more sophisticated ways to display material on the screen. So I suspect we'll continue to see more and more of that. I haven't seen any game changer stuff on the horizon as far as like virtual production tech for this NAB yet. But then again, the show hasn't started yet.
We are, this is before the show, but have you been seeing anything that's making it more accessible for like without massive budgets?
If you're willing to forego the idea of shooting in front of an LED wall and going back to a green screen, you can still get a lot of mileage out of real-time tools and spend a lot less money and get the kind of practice that will still apply in those kinds of stages. So, it really does scale up. I mean, I've seen really amazing stuff on YouTube that somebody did in front of like a big TV. So, I mean, and I think those are the kinds of things that do really good on a person's reel and, kind of open it up. Because, not everybody's going to be spending like tens of thousands of dollars to build their, LED setup. And you don't need to. I mean, the techniques are the same, whether it's projectors, it's green screen, it's a TV, I've seen people filming little dolls in front of their computer monitor. I mean, it's just like anything is possible, really.
Yeah, imagination. Have you been seeing some good projector setups, short throw projectors, or anything that's like working out pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, I think projection is a challenge because you want to have that kind of, what's lovely about LED screens, as you know, is that since they're basically emissive light sources, it looks very even across the entire screen. There's not like areas where the screen is super bright over here. It's like, it looks like a continuous image. Whereas with a projector, since it's basically focusing the light from one point source, a bulb, onto a wall, it's like a headlight essentially. So wherever the image is, there's always going to be you'll see the brightness kind of begin to dim around the edges. And the way they fix that in big movies is they'll have multiple projectors kind of overlapping, so there's no dark spots. But
that probably ends up negating the cost.
Exactly. So I don't know. Maybe you could do something with a couple of overlapping projectors that would get around that. But yeah, that's what I've seen is like people who do that kind of setup. If it's a single projector, they have a really tough time because it's just like you can just see it just has this kind of halo effect around the backdrop because of the reality of essentially being a big spotlight from coming out of the projector. So yeah.
What else has just been on your radar? Excited about for the next like 1 to 2 year horizon?
Yeah, AI is the big thing. That's kind of the hype that's going on. And there is a lot of practical applications. As far as it comes into virtual production, I've seen it used a ton for kind of conceptual work, kind of storyboarding.
Have you been seeing anything that's been giving better control? Because that's always like a common thing of just like control of the frame, control of the camera, control of like what we wanted to generate. Yeah. Have you seen anything come out that's offering solutions to that?
To a point, I think there's I saw a couple of talks today that kind of go over the same issues, that there's a bit of a black box about most AI tools. Is like the distance between what you prompt and what the output is, there's this kind of black box in the middle that it doesn't even really know what it did. Because you could say, give me that again, but from this other angle, and it'll give you a completely different image.
What did you call it? A toddler with Blackmagic superpower?
Right, exactly. It really is. It's like, or like Picasso with like short-term memory loss. Uh-huh. It's like, sure, I can draw that. Oh, can you draw that again? Draw what? It's like basically how it works. But I've also seen interesting things like an AI renderer for a 3D engine where you just basically drop a renderer into a 3D scene, and instead of having to texture everything, it'll take the geometry that you started with and just essentially AIify that into a final image. And the results, I think, are getting, to me, that could be an interesting kind of like workflow, is if there was a way to make an AI renderer into Unreal, because one of the real challenges with making any kind of a scene for virtual production is you really want it to look photorealistic, and you're starting with very simple geometry in the model, and it's like you're adding photographic textures, you're adding, nerfs, whatever, to try and make it look more and more real. And if there was a way you could start with a very simple looking scene and then just turn it into a very finished looking image by just running it through an AI renderer, that could be awesome.
Explain that to me again of like how that would work, because I'm not like a 3D model expert. So like if you're saying you have a basic shape, or if you're trying to build a scene that you're looking on a virtual wall, you've got to build your shapes and then you got to texture it to make it look realistic.
Yeah, and usually,
that takes time.
Yeah, and those textures, that's what really makes, otherwise things just look like the shapes. And it's like, it's obviously 3D, it's a 3D scene, you see the geometry, but it doesn't look like something real. So a lot of the time an effort is being spent texturing those models in some way, either taking photographic reference, photogrammetry, but just trying to make these 3D objects in the computer look like they're, photographed things. And an AI renderer could maybe simplify that by just instead of you having to painstakingly, like, I have this photograph I'm going to use as a texture, here's a little video clip I'm going to use as a texture for this thing or whatever. You could just say, here's very simple geometry, this is my prompt style, whatever.
This should be a house.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And it'll, because that could be an interesting way to do it, because the computer will always have that starting reference to begin with. And, if it can just be more and more consistent on the style, I could totally see how maybe you'd be able to get the benefits of things like your geometry, your camera, all that kind of
That
stuff.
sounds like
in
a
3D
middle ground of like a video to video prompt instead of like a text
Exactly.
to video prompt.
Exactly, because that's the thing. I mean, I've been playing with those kinds of tools like video, and like text to video, and it's like it's exactly that. They can make great output once, but to try and coerce them into a sequence. Like I was reading about this guy who did the balloon head video for Sora.
Yeah.
And
Hollywood Reporter and
Right.
do a thing with
and is like, oh yeah, it would give us great output, but we would have to spend an inordinate amount of time fixing it with more traditional like paint
Yeah.
tools and stuff to try and make it look like it's like one shot to another would look fine, but you string them together in a sequence and it becomes obvious that the character is subtly changed in each shot. So they have to go back and fix that. So I mean, it almost like negates the purpose. It's like I have this very powerful thing, but it can only do like one shot at a time. And movies are made up of thousands of individual edits, and
Yeah, and he was like, you don't see all of the like horrific looking shots of like
Right.
a human, because it was like the balloon head, and it was like it wouldn't understand what they meant, so it
Right.
put a human face in the balloon
right.
a ton of times. Yeah, so it's obviously definitely early days, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be weird to, for example, watch a movie and like at every other shot, like the person's face looks different, or their clothes are changing,
yeah, and
or they're
character
getting taller,
consistency has been
shorter,
a
and
huge.
it's just like you'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's probably far off to actually have a character that's consistent, but everything around the character is probably going to be the first thing to hit, for Gen AI to hit effectively.
Yeah, and I've seen really good examples. I've seen like people that do amazing looking like anime movies where they generated a really nice looking backdrop. They kind of used like a Kubrick sort of approach to turn it into 2.5D and then use more traditional, cell animation, 3D animation to put the characters in. And that's a great looking combo because it's like you get these backgrounds that look very good and they're very quickly generated, but you only need one image to be the background versus like a consistent from frame to frame shot.
Right, I feel like you need to switch angles,
Right.
we need a different angle
So-
that we generated. That's
Yeah.
the challenge. Yeah.
So yeah, it's totally doable. And yeah, I mean, these are very early days, but yeah, I think that it has a lot of potential. And I mean, that's why I'm here. I mean, I'm waiting for the person to come out with the AI camera that you just talk to it and, it basically spits out whatever you want. Probably not this year, but maybe someday soon.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks a lot, Noah. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right.